Never Let a Waist Go to Crisis by Tom Seast. Rahm Emanuel. While he may not have originally coined the turn of phrase, Rahm Emanuel is famous for saying, "You never want a serious crisis to go to waste." He said this in November of 2008 while serving as chief of staff for President Obama. The sentence that he spoke after his original statement was, "It provides the opportunity to do things that were not possible to do before." I'm here to suggest that he may have had it wrong. He's wrong. I met Rahm Emanuel in November of 2007, before then Senator Obama announced his candidacy for president. I ran into him at a dinner meeting with many members of the Illinois Democratic Party. I wasn't a person with political leanings and had no idea who he or Senator Obama was, but we talked for about 5 minutes. I still think he's wrong. Never let a waste go to crisis. I think the statement should read, "Never let a waste go to crisis." It provides the opportunity to do things that are not possible to do after. But I'm basing this on my own experiences, and I have a lifetime of experience in letting my waist get a crisis. Sweets. While not heavy as a child, I quickly developed a lifelong obsession and taste for sweets. Although not evident in this photo from 1971, when I was in first grade, I would consume any large amount of soda pop and candy I could find. "1984. I spent most of my childhood and teen years getting plenty of exercise, as I bicycled, walked, and ran everywhere. But even with that, I still remember that I lost 32 pounds during my senior year of high school. So, my habit of eating bad foods containing processed sugar and drinking Mellow Yellow every day was catching up to me even then. In this picture, taken at my sister's high school graduation party, you can see that my waist was starting to show its signs of crisis, but I could still generally do everything that I wanted to do. And I had pens in my pocket, which demonstrated that I was optimistic about writing. 1989. The next 5 years were filled with lots of games of basketball, but I continued my bad habits of getting poor sleep, eating very poorly, but exercising heavily to burn off the calories. In this picture, taken on May 5th, 1989, the night before my wedding, you can see that my waist was still in crisis, but I continued to ignore the problem as it was not limiting me in any way. I was still riding a bicycle, but not as often. I still played basketball, but not as often. I still walked, but not as often. I just didn't have time. 2006. Marriage was wonderful for me, but I was obsessed with my work and my career. I put in long hours, continued to eat and drink poorly, and reduced my exercise. My sons and I were thrilled that the St. Louis Cardinals were winning that year and went on to win the World Series. I also could not lose. My waist was going to crisis, was really showing signs of how bad the crisis had become, as pictured here. 2008. I fell down some stairs at some point and injured my back, and I generally quit exercising. I had already quit sleeping correctly, and my eating and drinking of processed foods was at an all-time high. And, as you can see from the photos, my waist was in crisis, and it was obvious. Exercises like standing up, walking, or lifting were next to impossible. I really needed to make changes while I still could. 2010. By the end of 2010, the elephant in the room was obvious. But I had changed my diet, so I was starting to lose weight, but I was still huge. 2015. After riding my bicycle for roughly 20,000 miles and finally settling on a ketogenic diet, I managed to slim down fairly well by October of 2015. My waist was still in crisis, but it wasn't nearly as bad as it had been. 2016. I continued to be a big loser in 2016 and continued to lose weight until I reached my lowest weight since high school at about 253 pounds. I weighed just a little more than that in this photo, but this was eating well, avoiding processed foods, and riding my bicycle regularly. I was well prepared for a crisis as my waist was no longer in crisis. 2017. On January 3rd, 2017, my heart rate accelerated after a prolonged bout with pneumonia. I was in excellent physical condition and didn't even notice the problem until January 14th, 2017. My heart crisis was diagnosed as atrial fibrillation with rapid ventricular response along with heart failure, and this lasted for 14 months. The hormonal activity associated with the heart in crisis put my waist back in crisis for the next couple of years. But I now know that I would not have survived this crisis had I not resolved the original crisis of my waist. I continued to ride, but only rode about 400 miles while I was resolving my heart crisis. 2020. 2020 was a year of worldwide crisis for many, and I spent the early part of the year resolving heart failure and AFib with RVR again, this time caused by mold toxicity. Reversing the heart failure this time was much easier as I had a plan and knew what to do. I finished my year 2020 with my heart failure resolved and dropped back to 335 pounds. My weight, heart, waist, and lifestyle are far from perfect, but I'm losing weight regularly, sleeping as needed, eating well, drinking well, and battling chronic episodes of atrial tachycardia as I continue to lose. Don't let your waist go to crisis. I guess the moral of the story is that you shouldn't let your waist go to crisis, as having a large waist will likely make your crisis more difficult. While I have many regrets, I don't mind that I got my waist out of crisis so that I was prepared for my heart crisis. The mind is a terrible thing to waste, and the waist is a terrible thing to mind. So don't let your waist go to crisis like I did. May. Having a reduced waistline is no guarantee that you won't have health events. You might be like me and have your major health events after you reduce your crisis of the waist. But it's not a waste of time to reduce your waistline, as it definitely makes weathering a health crisis much easier to accomplish. If I can help you in any way, please let me know. I can point you in the direction of many health coaches that specialize in ways of reducing your waistline. If you like my writing or my reading, feel free to follow me at the links below.